He thought he covered everything. The house was split, the cars divided, the bank account sorted. On paper, it looked fair, clean, handled. But a year later, he was drowning in unexpected taxes, watching his retirement fade, and realizing his ex still had access to decisions that should have been his. That's when it hit him. It wasn't what he gave up that destroyed him. It was what he forgot to protect. Because when you've been married for a long time, the assets are more than just numbers. They're layered into your identity, your future, your control. And in the emotional chaos of divorce, most men focus on what's loud and obvious, while quietly overlooking the things that have the power to wreck their next chapter. It's not just about money. It's about leverage, security, legacy. And the truth is, by the time the ink dries, most men don't realize what they've lost until it's already gone. So before you settle, before you walk away thinking it's done, here are 8 things men routinely forget to protect during asset division, and why each one has the power to undo everything they thought they'd secured. He thought keeping the house meant he'd won, that giving up a portion of his retirement savings in exchange for staying in the home was a smart move. But a few years later, the house became a burden, the maintenance costs piled up, and the retirement money he gave away, gone forever. That's when he realized the first major mistake, underestimating the long-term value of retirement accounts and pension rights. Most men assume the house is the biggest asset, but over a 20 or 30-year marriage, it's often the retirement funds that quietly carry the most value. And while the house can drain your money over time, pensions and 401(k)s keep growing, even after the marriage ends. What makes it worse? Many men don't realize that their ex may be entitled to a portion of their pension even if they don't split it now. And in some cases, she'll receive spousal benefits from Social Security or a pension account you worked decades to build, just because you were married long enough. This isn't just about money, it's about time. You can earn more income. You can rebuild savings. But you can't go back and undo 25 years of pension contributions. And if you hand that over too easily, just to wrap things up or keep the peace, you're giving away years of your future comfort in exchange for short-term relief. Worse still, many men forget to protect how those accounts are divided. Without a proper QDRO, qualified domestic relations order, the division may not happen legally, which can trigger penalties and taxes that come straight out of your pocket. You didn't lose because you were careless. You lost because you didn't realize what that retirement money really represented. Freedom. And once it's gone, you're not just starting over. You're doing it without the safety net you spent a lifetime building. He assumed the divorce would take care of everything. The assets were divided, the titles transferred, the accounts split. But months later, he got a call from the insurance company. His ex was still listed as the beneficiary on his life policy. That's when he learned the second costly oversight, forgetting to update life insurance and beneficiary designations. It's one of the most common traps. You think the divorce decree automatically changes everything. It doesn't. Life insurance, retirement accounts, even brokerage and bank accounts often have separate beneficiary rules, meaning whoever's listed on the policy gets the payout, no matter what your will says or what your lawyer filed. And sometimes, the divorce agreement requires you to keep your ex as the beneficiary, especially if child support or alimony is involved. Judges may order you to carry life insurance, naming her as the recipient, to secure her financial future in case something happens to you. That means you could be paying monthly premiums for years, knowing the payout won't go to your kids, your new spouse, or anyone you actually choose. It'll go to the woman you just divorced. Even worse, many men forget they have multiple policies, old ones from past jobs, or accounts they haven't looked in decades. All it takes is one overlooked form, and your money ends up in the wrong hands. It's not just about money. It's about control, about who gets the final say when you're not around to explain anything. And if you don't update those details yourself, no one else will. So before you assume everything's been handled, check the fine print. Because in the end, what you leave behind could go to someone you spent years trying to leave behind. He was so focused on splitting the big stuff, property, accounts, debt, that he didn't think twice when she asked to keep the photo albums, the old letters, or that box of family keepsakes in the attic. It's just stuff, he told himself. But months later, sitting alone in a sterile apartment, he realized what he'd really lost. That's the third overlooked asset: sentimental and personal items you can never replace. During divorce, emotions are raw and logic takes over. You start treating everything like a transaction. Divide this, sign that, move on. But not everything can be measured in dollars. And when you're negotiating from a place of exhaustion, it's easy to give up the things that feel small until you realize they carried your history. Old family photos, childhood drawings, journals, wedding videos, your dad's watch, her grandmother's recipes. Things that aren't worth anything on paper but carry the deepest weight. And once they're gone, they don't come back. There's no legal path to force someone to return a handwritten letter from your daughter's 10th birthday, or that one photo you forgot to make a copy of before you left. What's worse, these items are often used in subtle ways later, shared with the kids, displayed online, or simply held onto as a way of controlling the emotional narrative. And while you're rebuilding your life from scratch, she's surrounded by pieces of the past you never got to hold on to. It's not about clinging to memories. It's about understanding what matters before you sign it away. Because the courts won't fight for your photo album, and your lawyer won't prioritize your grandfather's cufflinks. If you don't ask for it, if you don't list it, it's gone. And once you're on the outside looking in, you'll realize the smallest things often leave the biggest holes. He signed the divorce papers, thinking the debts were split evenly. She got the car, so she'd keep making the payments. He'd cover the credit card with his name on it. Fair enough, or so he thought. But 6 months later, his credit score tanked. She'd stopped paying her portion, and now the collection calls were coming to him. That's the fourth overlooked danger: joint debts that stay legally tied to your name, no matter what the divorce agreement says. Here's what most men don't understand. Divorce decrees don't override contracts. If your name is on a loan, a credit card, or a line of credit, you're still legally responsible for it. It doesn't matter if the divorce judgment says she's supposed to pay. If she misses a payment, you get hit. Your credit, your liability, your future loan approvals. And it doesn't stop at personal cards. Think about auto loans, joint bank overdrafts, even store accounts you forgot existed. If she walks away from those responsibilities, or worse, starts using those accounts out of spite, you're the one left holding the bag. Some men try to refinance the debt in their own name or transfer balances post-divorce. But lenders don't always cooperate. And if the relationship with your ex turns hostile, good luck getting her to voluntarily take your name off anything. Meanwhile, your credit score quietly erodes. You go to apply for a mortgage or a new car, only to find out your ex's missed payments are now your problem. The court may sympathize, but the financial system doesn't. So before you assume it's all squared away, go deeper. Close joint accounts. Freeze lines of credit. Refinance if you can. Because even after the marriage ends, your financial future can still be chained to her choices. And once your credit is damaged, it's not just numbers that suffer. It's your ability to rebuild a new life at all. He remembered to change the locks. He changed his mailing address. He even set up new bank accounts. But weeks after the divorce, she was still accessing shared cloud storage, still had login info for his email, and still had copies of private conversations, financial documents, and old messages. That's when he realized the fifth asset he forgot to protect: digital accounts and access that can be used against you long after the marriage ends. In today's world, your life lives online. Bank logins, investment apps, photo backups, text histories, crypto wallets, even smart home devices, all of it creates a digital trail. And during divorce, many men focus on the big numbers, forgetting just how much power their ex still has through the screen. Sometimes it's innocent. She still has the Netflix password. But sometimes it's strategic. She downloads old messages to use in court. She watches your spending through a shared finance app. She scrolls through photos you thought were private, or worse, uses saved conversations to twist your words during custody hearings. Men also forget about the assets stored online: stocks and investment apps, crypto in forgotten wallets, miles or points in loyalty accounts. These don't show up in obvious paperwork, and if you don't list them, they may never be divided fairly. Or your ex might quietly drain them before you even realize they're missing. And once she has the access, you can't undo the damage. You can't unsend that email. You can't unshare that photo. You can't reclaim private texts that have already been printed and filed into a courtroom folder. The worst part? Most men don't even remember what they've shared until it's too late. So before you finalize anything, audit your digital life. Change every password. Check every shared folder. Lock down anything that holds data, access, or leverage. Because if you don't, you're giving your ex a set of keys that open every door you thought you closed. He assumed the divorce was the only paperwork he needed. The assets were divided, custody was settled, and the court had signed off. But months later, during a medical scare, his ex was still listed as his emergency contact. And worse, still had legal authority to make decisions on his behalf. That's when he discovered the sixth critical oversight: failing to update estate plans and power of attorney documents. When you've been married for a long time, your entire legal footprint is often tied to your spouse. Wills, living trusts, healthcare proxies, financial powers of attorney. All of it usually names your ex as the primary decision maker. And after a divorce, most men forget to review or update any of it. The result? If you're hospitalized and unconscious, she might be the one doctors call. If something happens to you unexpectedly, she could still be in charge of managing your finances, accessing your accounts, or even making decisions about your estate, especially if your original documents were never revoked or rewritten. Even worse, if you pass away without updating your will, she might still inherit assets or property you never intended her to have. And if you've remarried or have kids from a new relationship, the legal mess left behind can turn into a nightmare for everyone involved. This isn't just about protecting money, it's about protecting autonomy. Who gets to speak for you when you can't? Who makes decisions about your health, your care, your legacy? Most men are so exhausted by the time divorce is finalized that they overlook these final steps. But if you don't reclaim control of your estate documents, you're handing enormous power to someone you just legally separated from. So ask yourself, if something happened tomorrow, who would the system still recognize as your voice? If the answer is your ex, it's time to rewrite the script before life does it for you. You thought the hard part was over. The court hearings were done, the settlement was signed, and he was ready to move on. But then tax season hit, and with it, a letter from the IRS he didn't expect. A 5-figure bill tied to capital gains, back taxes, and a filing error he didn't see coming. That's when reality sank in. He'd forgotten to protect himself from the tax traps hiding inside the divorce agreement. This is where divorce gets sneaky. On the surface, a settlement can look fair. She gets the house, you keep the investment account, everything's split. But the IRS doesn't care what looks fair. It cares about who's responsible for the tax consequences. And if you didn't read the fine print or talk to a tax professional before signing, you could be left holding a massive bill for assets you don't even control anymore. Capital gains on property sales, penalties for early withdrawals from retirement accounts, alimony payments that used to be tax-deductible before 2019 but aren't anymore. Even something as simple as claiming dependents on your taxes can trigger financial fallout if it wasn't clearly outlined in the agreement. Some men end up paying taxes on accounts they never touched. Others are audited because their ex reported something differently on her return. And once the IRS gets involved, it doesn't matter what the divorce judge said. You're still responsible for your share. The danger is that most of these issues don't hit immediately. They show up months later, when you've already moved on, already adjusted to a new life, only to get blindsided by a tax bill that wrecks your savings, your credit, or your ability to stay ahead financially. So if you're in the middle of divorce, don't just think about what you're getting. Think about what each asset costs in the eyes of the government. Because in the world of taxes, it's not what you walk away with that matters most. It's what follows you after the ink dries. He was tired of fighting. The custody battle had dragged on for months. The legal bills were piling up, and he just wanted peace. So he agreed to fewer overnights, gave up certain holidays, and settled for visitation that worked for now. What he didn't realize was that he wasn't just giving up time. He was giving up influence. And that's the final thing most men forget to protect: control over the narrative with their kids. Divorce isn't just a legal split, it's an emotional one. And in the chaos, it's easy to focus so much on the assets The paperwork, the financial survival, that you forget your presence is an asset too. Time spent, routines shared, small decisions made every day. That's what builds the bond between a father and his children. And when you compromise that time just to get through it, you unknowingly redefine your role in their lives. Because once the dust settles, your ex becomes the default parent. She handles the school pickups, the doctor visits, the parent-teacher meetings. She becomes the voice they hear most. And slowly, what used to be a shared family becomes two separate worlds, hers and yours on weekends. Over time, that dynamic hardens. Your say in discipline, education, even medical decisions starts to fade. Not because you're absent, but because you're no longer integrated. And as your kids grow, they begin to reflect the version of you they're given, what they're told, what they observe, and what's missing when you're not around. The worst part? Many men don't notice it happening until years have passed, until their kids start pulling away, until they realize they're seen as an outsider. Not by choice, but by default. You thought you were choosing peace. What you really gave up was position. And if you don't protect your voice in your children's lives during divorce, you may find one day that it's no longer heard at all. By the time the divorce is finalized, most men breathe a sigh of relief. The battles are over, the paperwork is done, and the split feels complete. But what they don't realize is that some of the deepest losses haven't hit yet, because they weren't loud, they weren't obvious, and they weren't fought for when it mattered most. You focused on the house, the money, the visible things. But the damage came from the details you didn't know to protect. Your retirement, your credit, your legal voice, your access to memories, your influence as a father. These weren't just assets. They were anchors to your identity, your future, your freedom. The truth is, divorce isn't just a legal event. It's a turning point. And if you're not careful, the cost won't just show up in your bank account. It'll show up in your peace of mind, your relationship with your children, and your ability to build a life that feels like yours again. So before you sign anything, pause. Before you agree, just to get over with, ask the hard questions. Look beneath the surface. Think beyond the moment. Because what you forget to protect today may be exactly what you need tomorrow. And by the time you realize what's missing, it might be too late to get it back.